Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Resilience 360, part of our Phoenix series organized by the Office of Risk Management and Compliance at the National University of Singapore. My name is Hani, and I'm delighted to be your MC for this afternoon. Phoenix was launched to enhance risk awareness and enable the community to become risk intelligent and risk informed. This event marks the fourth year of ORMC's flagship series, touching on contemporary and emerging risk issues. We'd also like to invite everyone to stay connected with us. On the screen, you'll see a QR code that links to our department's LinkedIn and Instagram accounts. Do scan the code to follow us and stay updated with our latest news, events, and insights. We would like to welcome our Chief Risk Officer at NUS, Dr. Martin Liu, to deliver the opening address. Dr. Martin, please.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Really exciting to see everyone over here. I know we're still expecting and are looking forward to a few more people joining us. So welcome to Phoenix 2024. We did do this exercise. I think this is the fourth run of this particular Phoenix series. We did the 2023 event, and then we said, look, we actually managed to get a lot of insights. So it was very much, close to a more smaller group that we had. And then we said, look, 2024, let's do it different, not just get it open up to the larger community, but we also get speakers who are, from the industry, so that, the benefit of the cross-sharing would be much more, for both the community as well as for the speakers to come and see that they are engaging with a wider group. So we kind of, changed the format for Phoenix 2024. And then when we were thinking of what themes to look at, one of the themes that seems to be consistent across the last few years is resilience, okay? I'm sure you'll agree with me that, over the last few years, we've had a war with the virus. I mean, with the virus, or who won, I don't know, but we did have a war. We have a war with inflation still going on, presumably. We've had military wars still going on. There are AI wars, there are cyber wars. So there's some kind of conflict going on in some, size or shape across the world. We're starting to see it. But if you look at organizations, they usually have been able to dust themselves and get back and keep running on this, still continue to operate, most of them. There are some who kind of, vanish away, but there are a large part of it that's still. And one thing we realized that it's actually resilient, how resilient they've managed to stay. So we said, look, let the theme of this year be resiliencies. And with that, once again, welcome to Phoenix 2024 Resilience 360. This year, we have managed to get a really incredible lineup of speakers. We've got DBS, ENY, Synapse, Singtel, and GARP speakers over here. So first of all, a warm welcome to you all. Really, filled with gratitude for you all to be able to actually take time from your busy schedules and come and speak with us. So, Mr. Neo, Mr. Helge, Mr. Leonard, and on the panelists with me that will be sharing is Felicia, Mr. Anthony, and Aloysius. Thank you for joining us for this event. So I've been a GARP member for a very long time. So it's kind of with a mixed bag, a lot of pride and a lot of gratitude that GARP has, readily come to partner with us on this event. And I know there will be a bit of a sharing by GARP later, but good to have them here actually partnering with us, but also supporting the students in the engagement that we have with them. Now, versus last year, the other change that we decided to make this year is we are in a university, and we did really want to engage with the students, get them into this so that it's not just, young adults and aging adults being part of this, but also get the younger ones in. Hidden agenda, because when you look around, you don't see a lot of people excited to come into risk management. So the idea is that, look, if you get these people involved earlier, maybe they will get excited and come in. So we said, hey, this year, let's do a contest for them. And to make it a little more, we said, look, it's an environmental risk challenge. So we got them. We've got some very good submissions. We had a jury selection, as well as, we said, look, all of us are obsessed with American Idol and all the other stuff, Idol shows. So we said, let's do a popularity voting. So there's another set of, prizes for the most popular submission also. And we did have NUS's, university campus infrastructure, as well as the sustainability units, who have kindly, partnered with us on this particular agenda. So congratulations to all the students who have submitted. Best wishes for, those of you who are going to be presenting later on to the audience. So I'm supposed to keep this really short. So, once again, warm welcome to every one of you, taking the time, joining us here. I am quite confident, and I hope that you will walk away with a lot of takeaways. Like I said, we've got some great speakers, and since I'm not speaking, I would encourage you all to ask them a lot of questions. All those burning questions, save it up and ask them. You don't want to ask them whether it's going to be Trump or Taylor winning. I'm sorry, not Taylor, Harris. But on the other side of it, if you do want to know how many safety cars are going to be out on the F1, if you're an F1 fan like me, I'm more interested in how many times is a safety car coming out. I'm not sure they can answer that also. But other than that, feel free to throw away all your questions. Have a good next few hours over here. Enjoy the session. And I look forward to networking with you all later on. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. We will now commence the event with our speaker presentations. Do take note that QR codes will be displayed on the slides, allowing you to submit any questions you have for the speaker, which may be addressed in their respective Q&A sessions. Without further ado, let's introduce our first speaker, Mr. Neo Sing Hui, partner at Ernst Young Singapore Consulting Practice. Mr. Neo's role at Ernst Young is client-serving and market-focused, oriented towards a global network of large strategic accounts. He is currently the Global Client Service Partner for Temasek portfolio companies and government ministries and agencies, and also a lead partner of the Digital Hub practice. Mr. Neo, please.
Nelson Mandela mentioned that the greatest glory in living lies not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall. Today, we find ourselves in an increasingly volatile world where rapid changes and uncertainty challenge our traditional approaches. In my presentation, we will talk about how we build resilience, resilience for organizations to not just survive but thrive, finding ways to stay ahead and also create real value for the long haul. Why we face ourselves with a volatile world, which is brutal, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible, and what does this mean for us? An EY global survey, a risk survey that is conducted recently, this is a 3-year benchmark survey, with inputs with 500 global board directors from organizations that are with revenues of US $1 billion across several industries. We found that more than half of the respondents actually agree that emerging risks are insufficiently addressed. And companies are also declining. The longevity of companies are declining at an accelerated pace because of industry convergence, external landscape changes dramatically from technology, climate, geopolitics, and trade. Operating models are also shifting. We were just talking with the fellow speakers about employees now seeking purpose-driven organization, full-time roles being replaced by gig work. The nature of work is also changing because of technological advances. So stress in the system caused it to break, and this is externally driven and also unexpected. Systems that we rely on can stop working unexpectedly. And this can be caused by political reasons, changes in global financial systems, external shocks. Systems trigger anxiety, pose dilemmas without useful solution, and this makes trust very difficult. Things that we understood became false, and in a world of rapid changes, a mistake or a mistaken decision can cause overwhelming problems. How do we make good decisions for our organization, for example, if you can't be sure that the financial numbers actually reflects reality? And in a rapidly changing world, the cause and effect don't always match up in scale and speed. For example, in climate change, a delay in changes to carbon level leading to changes in temperature took more than a decade. So small changes can have undesired big effect. And how do we then understand a result when process or details are opaque with difficult or incomplete explanations? So these are all the causes that actually that we are facing, that cause a volatile environment that we are facing at the moment. And these are all happening at a faster pace and increasingly interconnected. So as this is a busy diagram, let me just explain. We see that the major types of disruption, oftentimes they are also a root cause. For example, cyber attack, IT and data center outages, for example. The root causes are cyber attack and third-party related disruption. All right? And the top root causes, if you look at the right side of the screen, the top root causes, they are also common across major disruption. For example, IT and data center outages. The root causes are capacity, overload demand, provider partner issues, fourth-party disruption, and network software. So you can see the interconnectedness between root causes and disruption, which some of the disruption themselves are root causes. So what is risk resilience that we are talking about here? This is the ability to have a concerted view and the management of risk so that we are able to have an anticipated, prepared, and become adaptive to a changing and evolving environment. What this means is that organization needs to look beyond the critical operation, considering both internal and external pillars, building capacity to anticipate emerging threats and opportunities, and being able to adapt, innovate strategies and capabilities. And in order to do that, it is no longer enough to have just a compliance mindset or having core risk management, for example, capabilities within specific domains. We have to move towards an integrated business continuity capability so that we can respond and recover from operations continuously across all the relevant domains. Resilience is also key to make sure that organizations can take proactive, forward-looking approach to deliver sustainable long-term value to stakeholders. And risk resilience actually cuts across all the 6 pillars here of organization resiliencies. Like, for example, strategic resilience, talent, operational, financial, value chain, information, and technology. And what it means is that for each of these 6 pillars of resiliencies, we ask ourselves, for example, in strategic resilience, is your company able to make shift, big bets decision without backtracking? How do you deploy future scenario planning to enable rapid adaptation during changing circumstances? In fact, as we speak, I am actually doing an enterprise risk management project for a state board, where they are very interested in not only knowing the risk pertaining to themselves, but also the upstream and downstream. And what they wanted to do was to cover the entire spectrum from upstream and downstream, the whole ecosystem and supply chain, relating to energy sources at the national level. And also to identify what are the choke points and also what are the scenarios planning that they need to be aware of, and to what extent and what will cause these scenarios to happen. And if these were to happen as a step board, what do they need to do? Working with the bigger ecosystem players, of course with government, and even cross-government from other countries. How do they respond to this? How much time do they have to respond to this? And basically what they're trying to do is to become resilient and to make sure that should there be any choke points or risks that will affect the supply of energy coming into Singapore, what can they do? How fast can they respond? All right. So how confident are you in your ability to sense and then respond changing macro environment? And then financial, of course, the ability to have financial stability and maintain against financial threats. The stress test, as I mentioned earlier, that this stat board is very interested to go into. How do you confirm that your financial reserve of the company can absorb the stress when such a scenario happens? And whether your organization have confidence in the financial strength of the counterparty, which is the third party that you work with. And oftentimes you see that these are all interrelated. Right? No companies, as we speak, in this environment actually works in silo. On talent, whether you know how you should restructure to enable cross-pollination and collaboration, whether you have programs to have appropriate competencies among your key employees, all right? And whether you have a culture and system to support innovation and crisis. We talked a little bit more about risk culture in the last segment later. And on operational resilience, whether your organization has already identified or is able to identify where, how many, and which of your assets are critical, and whether are there vulnerabilities that you need to be identified with respect to these critical assets, and the interdependencies of the cost of your assets with the other service providers, and whether you have a clearly defined policies and framework that make sure that you comply with regulatory requirement, have adequate set up and safeguards to address key risks, and lastly, how do you monitor technological advances, the risks that brought about from technological advances. Busy diagram, what it's trying to show here is that at 4 levels, the resilience, the organizational resilience basically needs to cover not only the strategy, but also the governance, the business continuity, the 6 pillars, as I mentioned, on the core resilience capabilities, as well as the monitoring and assessment capability. So ensuring that you have governance and culture that is essential as a foundation for a resilient organization, preparing for business disruption and anticipating unexpected changes in the environment. How you then reshape capabilities to recover should you have a business disruption, and how do you adapt to a changing environment? And then resiliencies in terms of monitoring and assessment when things do change. So in the risk management context, where we talk about risk resiliency, we then have to prepare ourselves even pre-disruption, during disruption, and post-disruption, right? With at pre-disruption, the ability to scan internal, external environment, spot emerging trends, and then identify vulnerability, as I mentioned, choke points, and then so that you know what are the proactive measures to take. During the disruption itself, being able to respond in an agile manner, mobilize your resources, and then as far as possible, minimize the impact and adapt to new opportunities and realities. And of course, post-recovery, post-disruption, meaning after your capabilities to be able to absorb shocks and continue to achieve your goals and reshape following the change in the environment. So a risk-resilient companies would need to cover the 8 dimensions, not just enterprise risk, but also BCM, IT security, operational risk management, health and safety, financial, technology, and of course, third-party risk. And risk capabilities, risk resilience capabilities actually can be enhanced through technology enablers, where technology can be used in a few areas to enhance the effectiveness and sharpen risk management. For example, there are tools and systems out there where they can scout internally and be able to help you identify what are the risks that is relevant to your sector. No longer you need only to rely on a group of people where you bring to the room and each one of them contribute their versions of what is risk and how and what are some of the areas of concern facing the organization. Actually, what you can do is with the system, with AI, they can actually identify what are the relevant risk factors and in what areas these risks are pertinent and relevant to your industry. This gives you the feedback and areas or points of reference for you to consider. It even able to tell you of these risks, which are those that are more pertinent relevant to the sector so that you can compare and ask if this risk is actually more pertinent to my competitor or a peer organization. Why am I not considering as a key risk? All right. Now, I mentioned about risk culture at the beginning. How is it relevant to risk resilience, or the resilience, how does it contribute to the resiliencies of an organization? So risk culture plays a crucial role in shaping organization and resiliency. Few points here. One, a strong work culture actually foster awareness of potential threats and opportunities, encourage open communication and informed decision making. People are then more comfortable, willing to express concerns, and these will lead to better strategies and solutions. Companies are also better adapt to evolving circumstances, promote flexibility, and encourage teams to pivot quickly in response to new information. And lastly, organizations with a strong risk culture often view failure as a leading opportunity and helps to build resiliency, with the team willing to experience and innovate without fear of consequence. Now, what do we need to consider in a culture to build a strong risk culture? Basically, there are five pillars here. Leadership, which refers to the tone from the top, leadership behavior, organization structure, the risk transparency and setting a risk appetite, organization capability, and talent management. So in risk culture, everybody plays a role, from the executive all the way to external stakeholders, with executive defining the right culture, model behaviors, meaning walk the talk with the tone at the top, providing open and a safe environment for feedback, ensuring that the traits and behaviors are present. These are roles and responsibilities of the board. At the employees level, you lift the culture, adapt the ways of working, provide open and honest feedback. And external stakeholders, you hold the organization accountable for being transparent and accountable. So lastly, a shift in approach must happen to create a risk-resilient organization that is agile and be able to adapt to the changing environment. 4 questions to ask yourself. Does your organization vision and mission reflect the intent to build resiliency across all parts of your business? There must be a strong intent and purpose to do so. And whether your organization has the ability to know and be aware of internal and external environment and changes which brought about the risks, events, and opportunities that can then influence your enterprise resiliency. Thirdly, whether you put in place a continuous process of improvement across an end-to-end value cycle to achieve and maintain operating level. And lastly, does your organization test or flex resiliency against operational and strategic scenario? As I mentioned, understanding the choke points as well as what are the scenarios that can happen, and if those scenarios will have to happen, what is the implication and what can you do to address those implications? So success is not final, failure not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And to continue, you need to be resilient. Thank you. Maybe I take this question. How can smaller or mid-sized organizations with fewer resources apply a systematic approach to resilience without being overwhelmed by complexity or risk management? So it's a good question, valid one. 4 things to look out for. Firstly, start with a risk assessment. That's the most basic. Focus on the most critical risks that impact your organization. As mentioned before, you can leverage on industry benchmark. I mentioned before there are systems which are actually able to collate risk that is relevant to the sector that you are in, and then you allow you to make comparison. It makes your job easier. All right. It doesn't mean that you adopt all the risks that is found from the system. Obviously, you have to adapt them to the unique circumstances and the operation and the environment that the company you are in. And of course, prioritize your risk. Use a basic risk matrix to prioritize risks that is relevant to you. Do not create a matrix that is too complicated. Secondly, implement very practical risk mitigation plan that is cost effective, focus on controls that offer the greatest basically benefit relative to their cost, and try to use or attempt to use technology solutions that can be scalable and also affordable to your organization. Thirdly, as I mentioned, foster a risk awareness culture. Few things here: encourage open communication about risks and resiliency, make it part of a regular team meetings or updates. And then, most importantly, with risk management consideration into operation. And lastly, leverage technology wisely. Use affordable risk management tools and software. There are many software out there right now on risk management that you can use. Some of them are actually catered for SMEs. All right? And if you can, think about automating some of the tasks to reduce the manual effort and streamline the process of risk management. The last question I will take, what challenges do organizations face when trying to break down silos in risk management, and how can they be overcome? This is a common question I get for projects that I do for my clients, be it government or LISCOs. And oftentimes we see that these companies actually, they already have some form of a risk management framework or process that's been set up, maybe pre-COVID. And some of these, they have the framework or process for a good 6 or 7 years. When they first started, it was all good, and then after that, it became a paper exercise. And people tend to just look at their own silo departments or the tasks that they have, they just submit and it's collated. I remember one of the PS I shan't mention which ministry was telling me, despite having a risk management framework and process, when they look at the risk, when he looked at the risk, he wasn't sure that it is a reflection of really the topmost concern that the ministry has. And also given the fact that post-COVID, a lot of the ministries' stat boards, their remit has been enlarged. The scope that they cover is also larger, more expanded, and the environment more complicated. He doesn't have the confidence that these risks that has been collated, reflected from bottoms up, really reflect reality. All right, so a few things to take note here. Challenges for organization phases when trying to break down silo. One is cultural resistance. So this is one of the challenges. So as mentioned before, this culture resistance actually can promote departmentalism, where teams operate in isolation. So it's important to take note of a few things. One is leadership buy-in. You gain support from top leader to champion the integrated risk management approach. Structured a change management process. Change management process actually changes behavior. And foster open communication. I talked about this before, about the benefits of breaking down silo. Secondly, think about data fragmentation. A lot of time, data may be scattered across different departments, especially the older the company is, and the more established the company is. Sometimes you have a lot of, I will call it tech debt, where data are stored in various forms and in various different departments. So just to consolidate, to have one single view of data is actually not easy. So a few ways you can look at this. One is centralized data management, have integration tools for data, and having strong data governance policy. And lastly, how do you manage competing priorities and resource constraints? Right, so oftentimes different departments may have competing priorities, but there's limited resources. For example, time, personnel, budget, and this makes it very difficult to align and integrate your risk management objectives. So a few things here. One is making sure that your risk management is aligned with the organizational goals and priorities. I mentioned earlier on, it's very important to integrate your risk management activities with strategic planning and operation. Form cross-functional team to address specific risk issue. This can facilitate collaboration across departments. Develop performance matrices. This can reflect the success of collaborating risk management efforts across departments. Prioritizing, meaning focusing on high impact risk management actions that actually will deliver the most significant benefit to the organization. And utilizing technology, for example, to automate and streamline management processes. And lastly, secure resources by demonstrating the value and the return on investment on the risk management activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. New. We have all gained invaluable insights into the various pillars of enterprise resilience and how we can collaborate to shift towards a more risk-resilient organization. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Helga, Chief Sustainability Officer at DBS Bank. Mr. Helga is responsible for developing DBS's overarching sustainability framework, driving sustainability initiatives, and representing DBS in various global and regional working groups. He also serves as a secretary to the bank's Board Sustainability Committee and chairs the Group Sustainability Council. Mr. Helga, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I needed a mic because I always need to move around a little bit. So great pleasure to be here and to see so many people here. So I'm Helge, as was just mentioned, Chief Sustainability Officer at DBS, and my job effectively is to help senior management set strategic direction on sustainability. And I will link this later to the theme of today. I asked earlier today, who's actually sitting in the room? What might they be interested in? And I understand it's quite a wide array of different people, but I'm going to link it all back to the major theme of risk. And I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainability, and I'm going to talk a little bit about disruption from digital and Gen AI, which are also linked. And then I'm going to describe a little bit how we at DBS go about this and transform ourselves. So I'm technologically extremely challenged, but I think we're going to get there. So bear with me here. I'm going to start very simple. You open the newspapers, you listen to a podcast, everybody is talking about stuff like, we need to be net zero by a certain time, we need to reduce carbon emissions. Most people don't fully understand this at all, and they don't have to. So let me maybe define sustainability first and foremost, so that we don't get lost. And I was thinking about it for a very long time, and I think we only want to accomplish two things in sustainability. Two things. Goal number one is that the people that live on this planet live well. Goal number two, the kids and grandkids of those people and their kids will also live well. And that's it. That's sustainability. Now, this means quite a lot of things, because live well means we have food on the plate. It means we enjoy breathing fresh air. It means that we can drink fresh and clean water. It means we have shelter. It means we get medical treatment in case of need. It means quite a lot of things. It might mean recharging our batteries, enjoying nature, doing a walk in McRitchie with our family and friends, having social get-togethers. All of this means live well. And humans have done extremely well on this left-hand side. We've done extraordinary things. We brought poverty levels down. Less women die at birth. Less kids die at birth. There's more access to education and all those things. We have done extraordinarily well as human beings on the left-hand side. We have not done so well on the right-hand side. So we have accomplished many things to make our life better, which is based on hard scientific data, but we are threatening a little bit the other side of the equation. Now, I started very easy and simple because it has an implication on how businesses are run their everyday life. And at DBS, we see ultimately sustainability as a continuation of other megatrends. We always talk about 3 megatrends. The first one was Asia. Over the last few decades, Asia has had monumental population and socioeconomic growth. Amazing. Singapore, of course, is an economic miracle, but Asia overall, amazing growth. And at DBS, we try to position ourselves accordingly. Then there was the digital wave that started also a very long time ago. Massive, massive disruption. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do on Gen AI, which is nothing but mind-boggling in one moment. And sustainability is another megatrend. Now, why do I mention this? It has gigantic implications on how businesses are being run. If we are not conscious about these megatrends and what are the key drivers, we don't understand the risks. And wherever there's risk, there's also an opportunity. And for us at DBS, we really need to understand these megatrends and position ourselves accordingly to protect ourselves against new emerging risks and to reap the rewards and capture opportunities. So we've created this DBS house, and we strongly believe everything starts with purpose. Purpose is essential. If organizations don't have a purpose, I don't think they will survive. And one of the key takeaways from this DBS house is our vision to be the best bank for a better world. And the latter part encapsulates our approach to sustainability. For those that know, actually the origin of DBS was the Development Bank of Singapore, effectively created to foster or support the industrialization of the nation. And hence purpose is deeply ingrained in everything that we do. And don't take that lightly. So we have created this house. We asked ourselves, what's our role in society? Why do we exist? And reflect on the megatrends, Asia, digital, sustainability. We need to reinvent our purpose, need to reinvent our role in society to be relevant. And this is a fundamental part of our strategy. Now, touching upon, for one brief moment, on sustainability. So we've developed 3 pillars. On the left-hand side, you see responsible banking. That's all about how we empower our customers to being more sustainable. So that can be retail customers, private banking, wealth, SMEs, large corporates. And I talked about the megatrend. I talked about the fact that sustainability, whether we like it or not, will change the world. Businesses will be turned upside down. 3 years ago, nobody really knew BYD. Now they're eating the European car manufacturers for breakfast. That is something that we need to understand and anticipate. So that is the left-hand side. One of the critical areas that we do on the left-hand side is our approach to net zero. So that's always weird. When I'm at a barbecue with friends, they always ask me, Helge, you work for a bank. Why do you talk about decarbonization? And rightly so. So we don't produce cars, we don't produce iPads, but we are enabling economic activities with lending and financing. So you can ultimately attribute greenhouse gas emissions back to us as a lender to the extent of our lending support. So the way we allocate capital has an impact on society. So that's a big piece. In the middle part, it's more the inward-looking piece. How do we conduct ourselves as an organization? So there are items like diversity, equity, inclusion. We have a lot of things that we do for our employees. And so on and so forth. And on the right-hand side, impact beyond banking is predominantly driven by the DBS Foundation, which we're very proud of. The DBS Foundation has existed for a very long time and always supported the community at large, for example, with future-ready skills, but also social entrepreneurs and SMEs. Maybe a little story about purpose and the DBS Foundation. It was July, and sorry NUS, but it was July when we flew in Cambridge University and we did a bit of a session on sustainability. And at the end of the day, we teed up our discussion again. What's our role in society? Why do we exist? And the outcome of that discussion was that we committed publicly to now put another up to 1 billion SGD into the DBS Foundation to actually help the community at large across a couple of themes. in terms of basic needs and so on and so forth. So putting money where our mouth is. So very proud of this. So it's very, very holistic approach to sustainability. Now, I come closer to the actual topic on risk. You might ask yourself, man, Helge is really talking very generically, but I'm going to come to the point of risk in a moment. So this is how we organize ourselves. It's also a very complicated slide, but only two key messages. Message number one, we brought sustainability all the way to the board level. So this is, again, a mega trend. It will transform societies, it will transform businesses, it will turn businesses upside down across all the sectors, whether it's mobility, energy, the built-in environment, everything will be turned upside down. So we need this to bring this to board level, to have really highest oversight over this topic. So that's message number one. The other message is we're integrating it into everything that we do. You might know there was this famous get-together once. John F. Kennedy, US president, walked through the NASA building and passed by a janitor and said, "Hey, I'm John F. Kennedy, what are you doing here?" And the janitor said, "I help people fly to moon." And that's a little bit our concept. We're integrating sustainability into everything we do. It's not the icing on the cake, it's the cake itself. And for risk management, this means that sustainability is a risk driver that affects other risks that we have looked at for a very long time. For example, we are providing money to somebody else, so credit risk is a really, really important part of what we do in our assessment. So what's the probability of that person defaulting? If that person defaults, how much of my money do I get back? It's classical credit analysis. Sustainability affects that. It's not a new risk element, it's a risk driver that affects other risk elements. And I was just half joking, half seriously before the session started. Would you still be comfortable giving a long-dated loan to one of these beautiful, beautiful car manufacturers in Europe whose cars have been admired for decades? Maybe not. The changes in society and economy are so stark and so fast that you really need to understand this. There are huge, what we call transition risks. Are the products and services offered by companies fit for purpose? Are they future-proof? And if they're not future-proof, is there a plan in place to make them future-proof? And mobility is one of these areas. Mobility will be electrified. It's just a question of time. Not if, but when. So if you're a car manufacturer or you're an SME servicing car manufacturers, you need to ask yourself, are your products fit for purpose? And if not, what is my plan to get there to provide products and services that my customers will actually demand? And there are many, many other sectors in which this also plays a role. So integration into everything that we do, as opposed to there is another thing which we call sustainability, which we also analyze. No, it's part of one process, one assessment. Not enough time to touch upon this. We have many sustainability challenges. I defined what it means to live well. It's not only about climate. We're in Asia. We live and breathe Asia. My mother-in-law is Singaporean Chinese. I consider myself part Asian. Peranakan Chinese, very good food. But the point here is that the sustainability challenges are not only very huge, but they're also we don't have much time. We need to act fast. And that means the transformation of societies and economies will accelerate. We live in a complex world. There are many things a CEO needs to think about today. Geopolitics, cost of living crisis. We talked about inflation, wars, political risks, and so on and so forth. But this is another one. We don't have much time left. I don't know whether you know, but if we don't change the way we live, play, and work, we have about 5 years left until we hit this famous 1.5C scenario. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but the message is it's urgent. We can't sit here. So back to risk. I actually covered this already. When we think about sustainability, there is an opportunity lens and there is a risk lens. And I think I covered the risk already, and I mentioned that we really integrate it into everything we do. And specifically on climate, we always subdivide this into physical climate risks. So there are implications of climate change that affect physically infrastructure and business operations. And there's transition risk. The latter was the example I made on automotive and the electrification of mobility. Are you fit for purpose? And we can do this for any sector. So it's really opportunity and risk. And on top of that, of course, a societal responsibility. So I move a little bit on, just checking time, a bit on to the second part. So this is our big boss, one of the most visionary leaders I've ever come close to. And he really has shaped DBS, and I think has shaped, to some extent, even Singapore and beyond. And he is one of the key drivers behind all of what I just said, identification of mega trends, the way we position ourselves. And he talks about things like we shouldn't be or act like a bank. We should be more like a startup in terms of culture, in terms of how we approach things. And we have really radically changed the way we operate as a bank. Let me give you one data point, which is maybe also quite interesting. We have about 40,000 employees. Every third is a data scientist or software engineer. So 1, 2 data scientists, 1, 2 data scientists, 1, 2 data scientists. The digital transformation has been quite amazing, and the way we service customers and also the way we operate internally has been quite amazing. And these are a couple of things that are core focus areas. So digital to the core. Creating a data architecture that facilitates fast and efficient decision taking. We have created a huge data lake, one source of truth, which is accessed by everyone, by the risk management teams, by the front office teams, by the finance teams, one source of truth, all very digital, which allows us to be much more analytical. Many examples. We can do daily P&L and balance sheet flashes to identify certain trends and so on and so forth. It's really very critical. We've also radically changed the way we organize ourselves. This might now sound really weird, but in traditional organizational structures, organizations are organized by verticals. There's a front office function, there's a risk function, there is a operations function, and so on and so forth. We actually have turned this 90-degree around, and we organize ourselves horizontally, which means we are creating journeys which are customer focused. Wherever the customer is, could be a retail customer, private banking customer, and ultimately cut through these verticals with everyone having the ultimate purpose to deliver something to a customer. It sounds very simple. It's extremely complicated in real life, and it's all data driven. Now, GenAI is the next big thing. I already have a GenAI co-pilot. My life has changed. I now read 500 pages in 3 minutes. Which took really longer just a little while ago. We brought it into our firewall. We call it DBS GPT, which means we can use it for our internal data lake. That is quite critical because everyone can go to OpenAI on web and does something with GenAI, but you need to bring it into your firewall. And everyone does GenAI, by the way. Absolutely everyone. I don't know a single organization that doesn't do GenAI. But the success factors will be driven by 2 things. One is the data architecture, and 2 is the talent base. Do you actually have the talents in-house to do this? And the other day, I live in the East, I was running in East Coast Park, and then on Saturday I had an epiphany, and I wrote down in an email the wildest dreams on how we can use GenAI for sustainability in our client engagements, analytics, and so on. And the short answer from our data scientists were, yeah, okay, we can do this. When do you want it by? And I thought, wow, okay. So GenAI will fundamentally change the way we operate. The analytical power is amazing, and already today in our risk management processes, it's embedded. You're a relationship manager that wants to provide a loan to a customer. Depending on what type of customer it is and what sector this customer is in, you need to fill in an ESG risk questionnaire that is integrated in our risk assessment. Now, the relationship manager can upload documents and ask GenAI to do that. So GenAI is filling in the risk questionnaire. That already, then you ask yourself, do I need to hire 10 people for filling in risk questionnaires, or do I need 1 data scientist to make sure the models work appropriately? And you would know our answer. So it's quite consequential. already now embedded in our risk management processes, and soon in a much bigger way will transform the way we use the analytical power arising from it in our client customer engagements. Gen AI is not without risks. There are ethical questions to be answered. There are technological challenges to be answered, and even sustainability challenges. So we have a fairly robust governance framework around, for example, the responsible use of data. We have a pure framework that guides this a little bit. So we need to be aware that Gen AI can be very powerful and very positive, but be aware of the risks as well. And again, some ethical questions need to be addressed as well. So I think I managed to get this done in slightly less than 20 minutes. So I tried to draw a painting which touches a little bit about sustainability and how this is part of a couple of mega trends that we see. And I talked a little bit about digital disruption and Gen AI and how we as a bank ultimately try to position ourselves to fulfill a purpose in society, and making sure that we deliver something to our customers that is really fit for future. So with that, I'm very happy to address any questions that you might have. Okay, so there is already one question that has many votes, which is, with DBS leveraging Asia's rapid economic growth and digital transformation, how does the bank ensure that these priorities do not conflict with its sustainability commitments? How do you address the environmental challenges posed by increased energy consumption from digitalization and the resource demands of fast-growing Asian economies while still advancing towards your sustainability goals? Okay, that is a lot of questions in one. Let me address them a little bit. So there was one question around Gen AI has potential and so on and so forth, but it also creates more energy demand, right? And there are some people that actually fear that Gen AI in itself will wreck the planet because we're going to need so much electricity to power all these computations. So on that, some hard data. So the starting point is not that bad. So according to the International Energy Agency, the demand for electricity coming from data centers, and data centers ultimately power new tech and Gen AI, in terms of total global electricity demand, is only 1 to 1.3%. And of course, we all expect this to go up. There's one study from Goldman Sachs, and they assume it might be 3 to 4% by 2030. So electricity demand from data centers divided by total electricity demand. So very low now, by 2030 will double, but still fairly low. So that means it is a challenge. We need to look into it, but it will also not wreck the planet tomorrow. I'm not talking about the ethical issues and so on and so forth. I'm just talking purely on energy consumption. Now, another point when it comes to energy usage by Gen AI and so on and so forth, human beings are wonderful people and we have done amazing things in life, but we are insanely bad at extrapolating. Super bad at anticipating what's happening in the future. And we always underestimate learning curves. Learning curves being defined as we do something new and then we learn on how to make it better, how to make it more efficient. So the notion is you can't just say, in the past we used X Gen AI computation power, now it's going to be Y that increased electricity like this, so in the future it will go up like that. That would assume we're not getting better at, for example, coding. So there's a big development right now on green coding, effectively doing the same computation with less energy demand. So we're going to get better at this. And the way we cool data centers and so on will also become better. So I'm not trying to downplay the problem, but there are actually solutions for that. How do banks ensure that the sectors and companies they report on are providing accurate and reliable sustainability data? What verification or auditing processes are in place to prevent inflated or misleading figures, particularly in relation to emission reduction targets? Absolutely very valid question. In short, let's just start by acknowledging that data is imperfect. Very imperfect. We live in a world of imperfection. So today there is no way that the way we approach climate and the way we want to engage customers, that we have perfect data to have an informed decision. It is just not perfect. There are two developments which make me very certain that this is going to become better. Number one, there are a lot of new sustainability reporting obligations on companies. I was personally sitting in a government committee here in Singapore which made sustainability reporting in line with the global standard mandatory for listed and non-listed entities. And that's happening around the world. So companies will need to provide more information, and that's mandatory. A large portion of the economy, like SMEs, will not be subject to these regulations, but they will get pressure from the bigger companies that are subject to this mandatory rules. So there will be a feed-through effect. So that's one. And the other one is digital solutions. Actually, in Singapore, again, we are actually already very strategic and forward-looking, and we are developing digital tools that facilitate the automation of data sourcing and processing. For example, I don't want to become too technical, but there are, for example, scope 2 emissions, a specific type of carbon emissions that arise from electricity consumption. It's very simple. You just go to the utility provider, get a download on the data, and you know what the scope 2 is. So there are more and more better digital tools. So today, data is very bad. In the future, it will become better. How can we make sure that the data is right? We have to look under the hood. We have to push up the sleeves and analyze this a little bit. We ourselves provide data to investors, and we are simply as transparent as can be and as humble as can be. Let's not overstate the claim, and let's be very clear on how we approach this. But ultimately, we acknowledge it's imperfect. We know it's going to become better, and we are trying to simply look under the hood. That's the short answer. Yes, I saw a hand, actually. Awesome. You're so young and lift your hand. That's actually great. Old school. I like it.
Thank you so much for the session. It was very insightful. So I'm Arman. I run a startup at NUS working on food security.
Yeah.
The time horizon for what I'm working on is 10, 15 years. And we've heard a lot about blended finance. The first question is, has it happened in Southeast Asia? Because the US seems like a very optimistic market, because I've seen a lot of deep tech entities receive billions of dollars over 15 years. What will it take for Southeast Asia to adopt a similar model or make that a reality? Predominantly around first-of-a-kind facilities and climate.
Thank you very much, and very interesting that you run a startup. By the way, let me first say, you say the US is very optimistic. When I'm in a bad mood and feel a bit down, I fly to China. That's typically, quite frankly, my country I go to get a positive attitude. But back to your question, I'm so sorry. So blended finance, by the way, and that's now again a bit technical, in layman's terms, is a type of financing where you crowd in public capital, for example from government, and private capital, and you merge it somewhat, because if you only use private capital, it wouldn't actually meet risk-return hurdles. So you need catalytic capital that can be from government, it can also be from foundations and so on, to merge it with private capital in order to make something actually viable, economic viable. So that's the simple notion of blended finance. And the short answer is blended finance has not worked globally, has not worked anywhere. This concept is so old, I definitely didn't have gray hair when that was invented. But the problem is we know how blended finance work. What we are very bad at is scaling it, replicating it. Typically, you have a specific asset or economic activity, you structure a blended finance deal that takes maybe 18 months. We're currently working on a deal in Indonesia where we want to phase out a coal power plant that has already taken 18 months, and we're not even done. And then you start with the next one and start again from Adam and Eve. That's actually the issue with blended finance. We know how it works, but globally haven't really cracked the nut on how can we replicate that. Now, I'm a little bit confused. Blended finance and startup, these are two very different things. So normally for startup, what we need is different forms of capital at the start, right? So typically there's huge technology risk potentially in what you do. So DBS might not be your partner at that point of time because we are not really a VC that finances something that has significant technology risk, right? So I assume your question alludes to the fact that the US is definitely very good at, they have a very good functioning capital market, right? So in Asia, for example, we are more lending based. banks providing financing. And in the US, you have a very well-integrated, well-functioning capital market. Of course, also integrated, right? So one regulator, one currency, one legal system. Whilst here it's, bit of everything. So I grant you that the US is better, and especially for startups accessing VC capital at the start, is definitely better. I would assume in Asia it will always be a bit different, because we have so many different legal systems and currencies. So my notion is, for you, that might always be a little bit trickier in Asia from that point of view, but I wouldn't link it to blended finance. We actually, in Singapore, we have developed what we call the Singapore Sustainable Finance Association. We try to crack a few wicked problems as a wider ecosystem, and blended finance is part of that. The logic there, by the way, is that the sustainability challenges are so daunting that nobody can do this alone. This thought that financial institutions can change capital allocation and magically the world will become a better place, that's quite naive. We need everyone to step in, governments, regulators, private sector, and so on. So I don't have a perfect answer for you, because the US in that specific area of VC money and financing startups is definitely a bit better, and I'm not sure whether we can replicate that easily in Asia. Well, with that, thank you very much, and I'm hanging around if you have more questions.
Welcome back, everyone. Now, let's dive into the panel discussion. We are honored to have our panelists, Mr. Anthony Lim, Ms. Felicia Ong, and Mr. Aloysius Phua for this segment. Mr. Anthony Lim is the Chapter Director for the Global Association of Risk Professionals, GARP, Singapore Chapter, and the Director of Risk at Saviara Holdings. With over 26 years of experience in the financial services sector, he specializes in risk and compliance. He has previously held senior risk roles at Aviva Investors and Eastspring Investments. Ms. Felicia Ong is the Head of Cyber and Information Security at Singtel. Before joining Singtel, Ms. Ong served as the APAC Head of Information Security and Singapore CISO at Citibank. She has previously held roles in compliance, technology controls, technology and cyber risk, and data privacy. Mr. Aloysius Phua is a financial services partner for governments, controls, and regulatory assurance at Ernst Young. With over 20 years at Ernst Young, Mr. Phua collaborates with global and local financial institutions to manage business and regulatory risks associated with their risk management and internal control processes. Today's panel discussion will be moderated by Dr. Martin Liu, Chief Risk Officer at NUS. May we invite the panelists and moderator to take their seats on the stage for the panel discussion.
Hey, good afternoon again, everybody. Hope you've been enjoying the session so far. We've had some really good sessions and a little bit of a panel discussion over here. We are looking at more of, emerging risks and things like that. So we've got some very seasoned practitioners over here, Anthony, Felicia, and Aloysius over here. And we're looking to hope and have an engaging conversation. So I'm going to start by one question. It's a typical, just an opening question, but more so from a perspective that, for the panelists, like we do know, and like it's already been said by some of the speakers, is we are living in very, very interesting times. Now, you can say interesting in a good way or a bad way, but like it or not, it is an interesting time. So we do have wars and conflicts that are going on, seem to be still going on. And if you have been paying attention, we have exploding pagers happening in one part of the world, which raises other concerns. And then even in Singapore, we are seeing, disruptive weather situations like, typhoons a little away from us, but even if you've been here the last couple of days, you know how weather can get really messy. And if you haven't heard it, you probably heard it today, there's also these cases of CrowdStrike. So just a couple of weeks ago, I was in a conference, and literally every session brought in the mention of CrowdStrike. So I'll let Felicia answer that question later, so I'll save that for her. But that's not all negative, right? On the positive side, if we've all been waiting for the Fed to cut interest rates, and finally that happened last night. So I don't know if you're celebrating, but if you just need a reason to celebrate, that's good. And on the other side, you also have, which I thought is a very positive news, is Instagram putting in rules to kind of lock down on what teens can do or not do on Instagram, which I thought is a good thing from a wellness perspective, but also from in terms of, restricting how social media can run amok and, create a lot of mess in life. So I thought that's a very positive thing. So probably obviously you're not here to listen to me, right? And so I'm going to stop talking and throw the question to our panelists over here is like, with all this going on, and I didn't even mention geopolitics, but I think that's mentioned. So what do you see as, risks that corporates or any organizations should be worrying about or will be worried of in the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years? If you were to take a horizon, what do you think would risk be? So Aloysius, and I can start with you, please.
Yeah. Just to start the ball rolling, I think there's a couple of things if I were to mention in terms of what are emerging risks to various corporates or institutions. Sustainability for sure, right? One of the things whereby, as what earlier speaker Helge has mentioned, is one of the external threats that's actually facing various corporates, like it or don't like it, is happening. Right, so I think that's one of the key things that's definitely worth taking closer on. Second thing, of course, emerging technology. With the use of emerging technologies, data, cyber security, resiliencies are going to be hot topics. You cannot not ignore it if you want to embrace the emerging technologies in order to navigate the deployment of such technologies safely. So that's the second key thing. The third key thing will be pertaining to our third-party risk management, because you don't operate alone, and a lot of times right now in terms of the organized structure is always trying to do the best you do while trying to get partners to work with you or rely upon in other parts of your business. And from that point of view, third-party management becomes equally important, especially as you talk about even in the sustainability space, how third parties could be forming part of the value chain in determining the impact from an organization perspective, or even from a perspective of deploying external or emerging technologies, whereby you may ask a vendor to help you to do so. That's something you need to consider. How do you manage that third-party reliance or resiliency?
So from a cyber perspective, there are a couple of areas that I would suggest to look into. I think one for sure is the abuse or the misuse of artificial intelligence and machine learning. It is not just supporting the defense side of the house, which largely would be us ourselves and you in the audience, but actually it's giving a lot of impetus and a lot of leverage to the attackers as well. So definitely this is a risk area which we should be focusing on, right? Not now, if not now, definitely in the near future. The other area I would also call out is from the cloud perspective. I think a lot of companies are moving towards adopting cloud-first strategy. And for very well-established companies, you probably do have a lot of existing technology or legacy technology where you'll be going through migration and so on and so forth, right? So the configuration of your cloud, the architecting of your cloud, making sure that it is not opening up new avenues or becoming a lot more porous for attackers, it's very key. The last area that probably I'll be calling out, but not everyone is yet focusing on, is the use of quantum. Right, because there's a concept that's called harvest now, decrypt later, which means to say that whilst the quantum technology today may not necessarily be able to, aid our attackers or not commercially available or widely available to attackers yet, but I think the abuse of it could be in years to come. So a lot of the times, what the attackers are doing are just tapping and stealing what your encrypted data is today. And then in years to come, when the technology is more widely available from a quantum perspective, they can be abusing it, to retrieve, your encrypted data and be selling it and disclosing it.
Yeah, thanks. Similar to my two panelists, because I think cyber sustainability, these are broad trends that are worrying every businesses. I'll just add on a couple of more points. One, of course, when these things are not just operating on its own, but if you look at it from an organizational perspective, where does the organization produce all their, let's say, their goods, their services, and all that? So the entire supply chain, and how resilient or vulnerable that supply chain is, and where are the key dependencies on each of the touch points and all that. And of course, when we talk about resiliency and all the whether the issue of cyber sustainability and all that, then naturally your suppliers and vendors, your tier 1 suppliers, that's like what Aloysius alluded to. Those are the things that we should always look out for. Then not extending one more step down will be your tier 2 supplier, meaning all your suppliers, material supplier, or your material subcontractors. These are things that businesses should also pay attention to. And when we look at where cyber and technology impact, a lot of focus seems to be on technology firms and all that in every organization supply chain, not forgetting that the entire supply chain comprises of many other service providers and vendors and all that. So the likes of the lawyers, the consultants, the service providers, these are organizations that some of them are very high trust. An email that comes from your lawyer will typically be, there will be a lot of attention to it because there's a high trust from these people, and that could end up being a phishing email that because the law firm was compromised in that sense, and that's the conduit where hackers are using that to reach out to get entry into the organization. So I think in sum up, I think this whole ecosystem of cyber and your supply chain and as well as any other technological risk doesn't operate on its own, but collectively.
Thanks. So clearly from a theme, right? I mean, if I were to do a mental word cloud, I would think that from what the speakers have mentioned, I keep hearing supply chain, third-party risk. There's a lot of cyber, and there's clearly technology keeps coming up over and again. And we'll kind of try to dissect each one of these, but there's one part that I'd like to go back to, and then, given Helga has spent a lot of time giving insights on that. And Aloysius, for you, the question would be we've seen a recent study by ACRA and obviously NUS Sustainable and Green Finance Institute, so I had to bring that in. So what they found is that large listed companies are progressing well with climate commitments. So if sitting where you are, if you were to give a view on what companies are doing, are they truly enough, or do we need more when it comes to addressing climate change?
Okay, I think we can all agree that in terms of commitments, disclosure is getting more apparent. Right? With the help of regulations, definitely that is pushing in terms of that agenda forward. But I would say that there's 3 key things that we should all be taking note of. I think the first one is definitely greenwashing risk. Yes, it's a disclosure. There's commitment being made. There's always reporting to say that, hey, how am I achieving this and that? But the question is that, can we rely 100% on that? So what's the ingredients to making sure that you can manage and mitigate the greenwashing risk? I would say that a couple of things. Governance, processes, risk management put in place, rely on your third line of defense like internal audit to provide internal assurance in terms of the data integrity, the processes, the controls towards the reporting, right? And that only gives you the comfort in terms of the bare minimum assurance, I would say so. To get to a further confidence building measure to try to build trust in the ecosystem, you could go for something even higher like external assurance, right? Getting somebody independent third party to assure on the disclosure to make sure they are reliable, they are appropriate. And of course, that's something that's in line with the reporting standards or framework that's been out there in the market. But last but not least, I think one of the key things also to take note of is definitely in terms of the need to view this not only as a compliance requirement, but use this as a strategic advantage to the company itself. If you were to disclose because of the SGX say so, or because MAS say so, you're just ticking the box. But actually, this is a good piece of information to investors, to the capital markets, to say that how am I managing my risk to navigate the future and emerging risks of sustainability, that my business model can stand up to such future risks. My business model is fine-tuned to cater for third-party management, to cater in terms of how I manufacture my products. How do I take note of risks posted by lending money, investing money in different companies or borrowers, right, to make the institution more sustainable in the future. So even from an investor standpoint, you want to invest in such companies, right, that can protect your returns, rather than thinking that, hey, what is going life to be for them as more environmental laws come out, or as a future have more regulatory requirements that may feel to comply with. So on that note, I think positioning that commitment or that disclosure to be a strategic advantage will help institutions not only manage the risk, but also look for opportunities to advance their corporate agenda going forward.
Thanks. Just a follow-up question on that. So mostly when we look at risk management, for those who have been in risk management for long, When you talk in an organization and you ask, oh, operational risk, how do you manage it? We typically talk about frameworks. A market risk is pretty much established, and you take credit risk or anything is very standard. But when it comes to ESG risk, if you're looking at a company that wants to set up, any advice in terms of how we could build a framework towards that effect?
I would say that maybe 3 pointers. The first one is that we should now start seeing sustainability risk or ESG risk as a key risk pillar, sitting alongside operational risk, technology risk, or even outsourcing risk or third-party risks. And depending on your business services, for a bank, it could be credit risk management, or for asset managers, could be investment management. So by virtue of that incorporated in the wider enterprise risk management key pillar, that is a starting point. Then given its status as one of the key risk pillar, it should have its own key risk framework, just like its own ESG risk framework. Like you have a technology risk framework, you have a third-party risk framework, right? And last ingredient will be a case of looking at how the interconnectivity between ESG sustainability risk with that of the other risk agenda. Take a bank, for example. When I call ESG risk, internally, it should be embedded into the credit risk process. When I decided to lend some monies to a corporate, I should start assessing what is the sustainability risk posted to this borrower that could affect its credit repayment ability to me from a bank perspective. Or even as the asset manager, I take investors' funds to invest into asset manager. I should also be cognizant of the fact that when I invest in a company, what is the ESG risk posted to the company? If I doing long-term investing approach, right, I should be cognizant of the fact that what are the changing environmental law landscapes or even ESG risk landscape that may post returns to the investee company that will come back to my portfolio value that I'm managing at the end of the day, so that I can fulfill my fiduciary duty back to my investors. So the third part is actually the most important part. ESG risk is not a standalone risk. ESG risk should be embedded towards the different parts of the organization. And just take one more example, even from a third-party standpoint, you work with different suppliers, right? If you do not select a supplier that is ESG cognizant or in line with your own sustainability mandate, so for example, if they encroach into some environmental breaches, their business fail, but it's a key supplier of yours, you're not able to manage that cost if you do not manage it appropriately, or the risk of not even delivering your service at the end of the day, because of lack of understanding the ESG risk posted to the third party that could be posted to further risk to your own business value proposition. So ESG, to summarize, is not only a standalone key risk, but more importantly, it should be linked back to all the other existing risks itself.
Thanks a lot. So, Felicia, over to you. So according to an IBM report, businesses that fall or do become victims to data breaches can expect a financial hit of nearly $5 million in average, give or take. And this amount has increased in the recent years. From what you see and from where you're sitting is in terms of, how have techniques that cyber criminals have used to exploit any vulnerabilities or anything, how has that evolved over a period of time?
So I think certainly, as I was also alluding to earlier, that with the proliferation of technology, as an example, artificial intelligence and machine learning, the bad actors or the attackers themselves have access to such technology, and one area of which they can use machine learning is actually to evade your security defenses. So your antivirus, your endpoint detection response, as an example, they can use it to evade, right, to avoid detection. The other aspect to which it can also be abused is that, in the past where more templatized phishing campaigns or more social engineering phishing campaigns are conducted manually, now with the use of AI and machine learning, I think there's a lot more data crunching and analysis that can be done. They can use these tools to trawl the net, the public space, the public domain, where our personal information resides. They can use it to craft, very targeted spear phishing campaigns and very sophisticated, using very, very sophisticated language and means as well. They may know where your comm cycle is, your bonus payout is, when your benefits and insurance renewal is, and they can have a domain that's very similar. They own a domain that's very similar to that of your company, and your one or more, even more of your employees within your company can then more easily fall victim to it. The other area, the second area that I would talk through is the cloud, which similarly I mentioned earlier. I think from a cloud perspective, because of how the traditional parameter has now shifted with the adoption of cloud and BYOD, definitely the attackers now are targeting your large cloud solution provider or service provider. So case in point, I think there was an Azure, or perhaps even more than one, downtime, and I'm sure quite a number of companies across the globe were also impacted. And there's also, if my memory serves me correct, in January 2024, there was also a Microsoft data breach caused by the exposure of Microsoft's email externally. And Microsoft themselves also have taken up notification protocols with affected enterprise clients, right? So such very targeted attacks towards concentrated cloud solution provider, where our companies have started to move towards, or even have, because of the cloud-first technology or cloud-first strategy, moved to already, could serve as a point of weakness for us. Last but not least, I think the area of supply chain, but I'll touch more on probably the software supply chain aspect. I think one very prime example, which probably you've seen or read in the news as well, is the SolarWinds back in 2020, right? Some of us here might also have been involved in assessing the impact and deploying the patches. Shifting left is not just us as defenders' task now. Even the attackers themselves are shifting left. They're going into our software supply chain. They're embedding backdoors, into our monitoring software, into our file sharing software, such that the organizations or the companies that employ this become vulnerable when they decide to target and to attack. So I would say that these are probably the three key areas of how cyber attackers or threat actors are evolving their techniques, where they also have access, not just to technology, but they are also observing how our technology patterns shift, our ecosystem shift, and they are starting to change their targeting techniques too.
Thanks. So if I were to just give you like a tough question in terms of, there was one control or two controls you had to pick, which you see, or let's take one, that you felt, hey, this control really needs to be made robust if we have to improve our cybersecurity. Which one would you pick?
I think that I would say, if I have a choice, I would pick three, right? I think, first of all, our footprint is getting larger and larger in terms of data, right? I don't think many organizations, in fact, if we look at the public email domains, how many of them really practice cleanup and deletion of personal data, right? And if we create an account on Facebook and if we decide to stop using it, or Instagram if we decide to stop using it, does it go away, right? So footprint on internet is probably there for a very, very long time. Now, why that is important is because we need to understand what our threat landscape is and what our critical assets are. Not only on the personal front, but also on the commercial and corporate front for the company that we work in. By identifying where these critical assets are and who the threat actors are, we will then be able to invest our limited resources around protecting these assets. So the typical method that we use to do this is called threat modeling. So to Martin's question, I would say that itself is a process, but by going through this process or this journey, it helps us identify what are the key controls that we need to be investing in. So I think threat modeling is a way for us to really be more laser focused in where we invest our money in implementing controls. The second area I think I would choose is to integrate intelligence, threat intelligence, into how our cyber operations and defense team should be hunting for threats in our environment. Because of the proliferation of zero-day threats and vulnerabilities, I think it's not just a matter of when, right, if but when that we get, but it could be that the threat actor is already nascent in our environment and we may not be aware of it. So hunting itself, again, is a process, but it can lead us to discover, the fact that there have been threat actors within our environment, or there have been malware in our environment, and we will then undertake controls or measures to clean it up. And studies have actually shown that the earlier we detect, the impact surface is actually much smaller, right? So I think that's kind of the golden rule that I will subscribe by. And the last area I would say, zero trust. And again, I think be very careful about the zero trust concept, because a lot of products and solutions and vendors out there would say that buy my product, right? I will give you zero trust. But I think always go back to fundamentals and basics. Do your access control well, do your privilege access activity monitoring, practice your incident response, encrypt your critical data, make sure that you only grant permissions or entitlements to the right group, and so on and so forth. So I would say the third area, the third control, if I have to choose to sum it up, is really go back to basics and focus on the core of what makes zero trust up.
Thanks, Felicia. Anthony, coming to you in terms of, you'll talk a lot about supply chain and we talk about supply chain risk resiliency, especially with the changing geopolitical situation where we're seeing trade wars, restrictions, trade, a lot of other conflicts that are impacting movement. How do you see, or how have these tensions and conflicts really impacted supply chain resiliency in a way?
Yeah. Like what you said earlier, the CrowdStrike, that word comes up in every other conversation that you have in recent times. I think similarly, I think geopolitics and geopolitical risk is something that in every forum that I attend, that's the thing that keeps coming up. And of course, these days, like what I said earlier, supply chain and how this whole thing integrate is a key area. So for myself, I've also been following geopolitical risk, particularly around the last 7 or 8 years. And some of the research that I read seems to also suggest that the current geopolitical risk environment is almost as high as when during the Cold War between US and USSR. Of course, the list of events that you can name off, the list goes on. And the risk for geopolitical risk will continue to remain high in the foreseeable future. And of course, when you talk about geopolitical risk, the impact itself is not just within that two country. In one of the World Economic Forum, the report talks about this thing called polycrisis. That means multiple crises happening at the same time. And the likes of, let's say, economic, environmental, geopolitical, and I think probably geopolitical risk is one of the key risk factors, drivers of the other risks, like let's say geopolitical tension here, and then like some of the earlier speakers talk about cyber attack arising from into Ukraine and all that. So then that brings then to how organizations and businesses if let's say their supply chain gets impacted. Here, supply chain again is a very broad term. So for this purpose, since we only have like 3 to 5 minutes, we'll specifically focus on manufacturing, logistics, and transport, because that's probably the easiest to dissect what is the impact arising from geopolitical risk, the root causes, as well as what kind of mitigation businesses can do. So obviously, when you talk about supply chain resilience, the flip side will be disruption. Then typically you talk about cost and delay, because time is money. Okay, and on top of that, supply chain itself, we also need to be aware that technology has moved a lot over the last 5-10 years and made just-in-time inventory system even more just-in-time. So that it results in very little margin of safety. To say that, let's say there's a disruption somewhere else, you probably will not be able to meet your downstream commitments and all that. So I think cost is one area arising from trade wars, tariffs, and all that. Delays, the Russia-Ukraine war resulted in Black Sea, the transport route being shut down, and then food crisis and food cannot be delivered. The third thing that probably, the third impact that not so apparent, probably will take a little bit of time to manifest itself, will be businesses relocating out. Let's say manufacturing businesses that run manufacturing and production in conflicted area will move out of that. One example, you guys may have already read, Apple increasing production of the iPhone from India out from China. Clearly, that's probably one of the impetus behind all this. And of course, the other thing that being resiliency has a cost to it. How much money do you want to spend to build resiliency? I think that's the thing that business needs to think about. And maybe just to round it up on the other two things. One thing is really true root cause of all these things about being not resilient in a cyber in your supply chain is really concentration. To me, that's really concentration. Concentration here, I would mean that concentration to, let's say, a single supplier or a single country for your supplies, or let's say a particular region. So that's concentration. If something happens to that country, that supplier or that region because of geopolitical issue, then the downstream impact is really significant. And of course, tier 1 supplier is what we always look for. And of course, then the next thing is really your tier 2 supplier. Like I say, your supplier's supplier. If you look under the hood, you probably see a lot of commonality. Yeah. So that's the thing. And for businesses wise, knowing all these things is important. I think few key things that businesses can do to mitigate geopolitical risks. I think first thing will be understanding the risk landscape. I think when I first started my career in the late 90s and early 2000s, one of my line manager tells me, if you want to be a good risk manager, read the newspaper. Of course, at that point in time, internet was in the nascent stage. There was no social media. So these days and age, information is there. There is no reason why businesses, particularly board, senior management, do not have an agenda item on broad macro themes, geopolitical risk, like the earlier speakers alluded to. Even if you stay in Singapore, you will get impacted one way or another, because in our globalized world, these things move very fast and cross boundary easily. So understanding the big macro picture and trend that and try to understand where it is. And then second of all is really to look at your supply chain end to end, map out where are the key dependencies are, and then try to identify any concentration risks to that. And probably the last one, maybe two more. One is diversification, to make sure that you have diversifying in terms of your suppliers. And the last thing is trade disruption insurance, our last traditional risk management strategy.
Right. Thanks. I did see we've already gone overrun by 1 minute, so I'm just going to steal another 1 minute to close out the thing. Just quick one, very quickly from three of you, if you can go. If there's, from a technology perspective, I know we said technology itself is a risk, but do you think technology can help us manage this risk? And what is that one pick that if you could, and if you could keep it really short? So Anthony, from you, and then I'll give you 10 seconds if you can.
Okay, so I'll just use the traditional risk management framework. Identify, monitor, manage, just a subset of it. I think technology is there to help to identify risk and predict risk. Manage, make sure that your technology is able to crunch all the data that you have to manage monitor it. And then the third thing, managing risk. I think, to me, I grew up watching Terminator. So Skynet going live is a matter of when. So AI-powered cyber attack will require AI-powered cyber defense.
Thanks. Felicia, your 10 minutes.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
Sorry,
10
seconds. This is why you need AI. Don't need me.
I tend to agree. Leverage AI. I think one of the earlier speakers got a question during the Q&A about SME, right? So especially for SME, I personally do see that with the accelerated rate of how threat actors are evolving, the defense side needs to catch up. And we can't be, putting FTEs all the time at these threats, because there's only so much our analysts and our, security analysts can go through. So leverage AI, do, your evaluation, your analysis of the products that are available in the market. There's a lot of open source, I think the earlier speaker also alluded to. But there are also paid products, through something which is fit for purpose and help to, assist you in your cyber defense journey.
Thanks. Aloysius, you have the last word in the last 10 seconds.
I would just say consider ESG in AI. And one example, quick one, when you develop a model, it could be biased, it could be actually impacting societal impact if you're not considered appropriately. But it also applies opportunity from the S side, because you can use AI to solve problems like financial inclusiveness for the underbanked, etc. So, new approach to thinking could be, can I use ESG angle to considering all different kind of risks, and even for the AI itself, both from a go-to-market standpoint and an internal implementation standpoint.
Right, thank you. Once again, thank you to us panelists. Really appreciate it. Good, a lot of insight. Thank you.
Wow, that was an incredibly fruitful discussion. We want to thank the panelists for sharing their perspectives on the future risks that corporates should prepare for and the importance of fostering a culture of resilience and proactiveness while leveraging technology. I hope everyone has found this session both enlightening and informative. May I invite all the speakers back on stage while we present everyone with a token of appreciation. Thank you once again to all the speakers. We will now move on to the NUS Environmental Risk Challenge student presentations. This is a new segment of our Phoenix series designed to encourage our students to submit their proposed actionable strategies and projects that enhance our understanding of environmental risk. Aligned with the objectives of the NUS Campus Sustainability Roadmap 2030, this Environmental Risk Challenge provides a platform to showcase our students' innovation and cultivate a better understanding of environmental risks within our community. There are two types of awards for this challenge: the People's Choice Award and the Judge's Choice Award. The shortlisted projects for the People's Choice Award will open for online voting, and the top 2 projects with the highest votes win. For the Judge's Choice Award, the winning project was determined after a round of evaluation by a panel of judges. May we now invite a representative from Reimagining Plastics in NUS to present their proposal. Xuanxi, please.
Okay, good afternoon all. My name is Xuanxi and I represent my team presenting on Reimagining Plastics in NUS. My other teammates are Amanda, Shinin, and Victoria. In 2022, the university's recycling rates increased to 32%. While this is a positive step forward, it still falls short of NUS' ambitious goal of reaching a 50% recycling rate by 2030. 2 significant challenges in recycling includes improper sorting of recyclables and contamination of recycling bins with non-recyclables, which reduces the effectiveness of recycling efforts. The ultimate goal of this project is to close the loop for plastics within NUS, aligning with the university's zero waste commitment. Our project focuses on 2 key objectives: increasing recycling rates on campus to help NUS achieve its 50% recycling goal by 2030, and closing the waste loops for plastics by transforming plastic waste into usable resources. In addition, we aim to shift mindsets about plastic consumption, encouraging the community to rethink how plastics can be repurposed at the end of their life cycles. Phase 1 of our solution leverages advanced image recognition algorithms, such as the MobileNet SSD model, to automate the detection and classification of waste into distinct categories: general waste, recyclables like metal, plastic, glass, and paper, and contaminants like food-contaminated recyclables and styrofoam. One of the key features is a real-time waste recognition. When a user disposes of waste, a LED lights will guide them to the correct bin. This not only reduces contamination, but also serves as a positive learning feedback loop for students and staff, helping them to gradually develop better recycling habits. With our solution, we aim to achieve a more than 95% accuracy in waste classification and a 50% reduction in contamination of recycling streams. Phase 2 of our project involves the mechanical recycling of plastics by shredding it into smaller pieces and utilizing injection molding to create custom plastic products. This method retains the original material's properties and is more economical than chemical recycling methods. We intend to pair this with pilot workshops for the NUS community to provide a use case for recycled plastics and to increase awareness for plastic recycling. The success of this plan can be evaluated numerically via the percentage of plastics recycled. To conclude, our project aims to provide comprehensive data for decision-making and foster environmental responsibility by encouraging a campus-wide norm of recycling and reuse. Thank you.
May we have the next team to present their proposal on mycogenesis?
Hi everyone, I'm Arman and I'm from Team Mycogenesis. We are involved in converting food side streams into edible human consumable protein we call mycoprotein. I'm Arman and the team consists of 3 other people, Hassan, Samyak and Sparsh. All of us are engineering students and we have a second major in innovation and design, which is mostly about catering to design thinking in engineering applications. So, as I mentioned, I'll give 2 data points. The first one is that 30% of all food that is produced is wasted. So that is carbon that is going to the landfills while it can be converted to a higher value product. And the second is that protein demand is set to double by 2050, and we don't have any realistic measure to produce edible protein at scale. Just for context, the most efficient way of producing animal protein requires 9 calories in and 1 calorie out. What is an approach to make that ratio 1:1? And that's where we come in. So today, over 931 million tons of food ends up in the landfill or is incinerated. And monetarily, this contributes to over $600 billion in wasted value. We see this carbon as a resource in converting this carbon into simpler sugars and then converting those sugars into protein using our strains. So I actually have our strain on me here. It's safe. I can pass it in the front row if it's possible. Just for you guys to visualize what we're working on, imagine beer production. Imagine those 60,000 liter huge reactors converting sugar to alcohol. But this strain is converting sugar into edible protein. The same infrastructure, everything is the same, but we're converting waste into sugars and these sugars into protein. So the strain that's being passed on is converting the waste from the beer industry, which is the grains, right? It's converting the grains into sugars and those sugars into protein. I realize I've repeated protein a lot of times here. But yeah, just for context, that's the whole value chain. That's how we plan to scale. And in terms of the end product that comes out of it, which is right here, in the end, it's a biomass that constitutes a 50% protein by weight without isolation. It is 20% fiber, it's white in color, and meant to be a drop-in replacement to flour. So imagine your breads, your bakery products, instead of them containing flour entirely, it now consists of this protein. Now, all of this has taken 3 years in reading research papers, talking to industry folks, more than a year in R&D, and we've sustained all of this through university grants. The project is called Mycogenesis, but I run a startup with Samyak called Possible Foods. And yeah, this is a shameless plug because we're looking for more grant funding. But thank you for the time.
Thank you, Team Mycogenesis, and thanks for all the sharing of innovative proposals. The creativity you have shown is truly inspiring. Let's give our students a well-deserved round of applause for their excellent contribution. We would now like to invite our NUS Deputy President of Administration, Mr. Clarence T., up on stage to present the NUS Environmental Risk Challenge Awards to the student winners. Mr. T, please. The first winner of the People's Choice Award with 2,498 votes, Project X. Unfortunately, they are unable to attend today's event. The next winner of the People's Choice Award with the highest number of 2,506 votes, Project Reimagining Plastics in NUS. Please come up on stage to receive your award. Next up, we would like to invite Ms. Shania Chen, Vice President of Business Development APAC at the Global Association of Risk Professionals, GARP, to co-present the award with Mr. T. GARP is the co-sponsor of the Judges' Choice Award, sponsoring the Sustainability and Climate Risk Certificate examinations of the winner. Now, let's invite the Judges' Choice Award winner, the team on Project Microgenesis. Please come up on stage to receive your award. Before we conclude, we will have Dr. Peck Thian Guan, Deputy Chief Risk Officer of NUS, to deliver the closing address. Dr. Peck, please.
We have come to the end of Phoenix 2024, Resilience 360, Reinventing Enterprises for a Dynamic Future. If you are somebody like me who is interested in risk, you would say, wow, what an afternoon. Just to quickly recap, we have heard from 3 speakers, 3 panelists, and a special presentation from Ms. Shania Chen about GARP. From Mr. Nyo Seng Hui from E&Y, he talked about the turbulent times that we are facing and how a single event could have multiple effects and could have ripple effects affecting a lot of parts of the economy. He talks about the 6 pillars of resilience, the 8 dimensions of the risk management system, and the 6 pillars of a risk-resilient culture. The next speaker was Mr. Helger from DBS, and he mentioned about the need to balance living well against preserving the earth for future generations. He talked about 3 megatrends: the Asia wave, the digital wave, and the sustainability wave. And for DBS, they have integrated sustainability in everything they do, including being the vision for the best bank for a better future. And what really impresses me is that in their drive to be digital, 1 in 3 of the staff is a data scientist. The third speaker was Mr. Leonard Ong from Synapse. He covered 3 points. 1, he introduced his organization. The second point he talked about was the general trends. He covered geopolitical risks, AI, and cybersecurity resilience. And in that, a key thing that I took away was, if not, it is now no longer not if, but when. That's passé already. But not when, but why not now? So you all got to be prepared for cyber attacks. In the panel's discussion, we had Mr. Anthony Lim, Mr. Felicia Ong, and Mr. Aloysius Hua, and they talked about hot topics. The hot topics covered sustainability, ESG risk, cyber risk, supply chain risk, technology risk. And in these, some of the key takeaways I got was, for ESG needs to now become a key pillar in risk management. And in cybersecurity, what sort of controls you need to have in place? You need to go back to the basics. For supply chain, take note about diversification of your supply chain. And we're also enlightened by the Student Environmental Risk Challenge, a presentation by the 2 groups. With that, we have come to the end of this Phoenix 2024. I hope you found this session enjoyable and is worth your investment, spending your afternoon here. Let's thank all the speakers and participation for this wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Peck. We have now come to the end of the seminar. I would like to take this moment to express our gratitude to all presenters and to you, the attendees, for taking the time to join us today. We have now come to the end of Phoenix 2024 Season 4. Once again, thank you so much for attending this event, and we hope to see you again in Season 5. Thank you.